You're standing in a plain farmhouse kitchen. An old woman picks up a knife so dull it won't split a ripe tomato. She flips a coffee mug upside down. 10 seconds later, that same blade glides through the tomato like it's water. No whetstone, no electric sharpener, nothing you'd expect. I watched it happen with my own eyes, and I want to tell you the truth. I stood there like a fool, waiting for the trick, for the hidden gadget in her apron pocket. There wasn't one. Here's what should be impossible. You can take the dullest knife in your drawer and bring it back to razor sharp in about 1 minute, using 2 things already sitting in your kitchen right now. The Amish have done this for generations, quietly, without a single powered tool, because they never had a store aisle full of sharpeners to talk them out of it. And the real finishing move, the one that turns merely sharp into shaving sharp, traces back to a leather tool that barbers swore by in the 1800s. I'm going to show you exactly what it is before we're done, and where I finally found it written down. Everything here works with what you already own. Nothing to buy, nothing to plug in. But let me back up, because that first 10 seconds with the coffee mug is where my confusion really started, and I have to walk you through it the way I lived it. I asked her what she used, and she just tapped the bottom of the mug and smiled. I turned that mug over in my hands like it held a secret. It was a heavy old stoneware cup, chipped on the handle. Nothing special. Then I felt it. Around the very bottom where the mug sits on the table, there's a ring that isn't glazed. It's rough, raw ceramic. Your finger catches on it like fine sandpaper. That rough ring is the whole trick to the first stage. Ceramic is harder than the steel in your kitchen knives. Not close. Ceramic sits far up the hardness scale, and the steel in an ordinary chef's knife sits well below it. So, when you drag a dull blade along that unglazed ring at the right angle, the ceramic shaves away a whisper of steel and leaves a fresh, keen edge behind. It works like a sharpening stone that costs you nothing, because you already drink your coffee out of it every single morning. Now, I didn't believe it could be that simple. I went home and grabbed the worst knife I owned, a cheap paring knife that had rolled around in a drawer for years. I flipped over my own mug. I held the blade at a slant against that gritty ring and pulled it toward me, heel to tip, 10 strokes on one side, 10 on the other. Then I tried to slice a sheet of paper. It bit right through. I stood in my own kitchen a little stunned, the same way I'd stood in hers. But that only cracked open a bigger question, and this is the part that kept me up. If a knife can be brought back that fast, with something as dumb as a coffee cup, then why does a knife go dull in the first place? Because the answer to that turned everything I thought I knew upside down. Here's what I always believed, and I bet you believe it too. I thought a dull knife was a worn-out knife. I thought the metal edge slowly ground itself away until there was nothing sharp left, and the only fix was to grind off more metal to find a new edge underneath. That's the story we've all been sold. And it's mostly wrong. Most of the time, your knife is not worn away. Your knife is bent. Under a microscope, the cutting edge of a blade is a long, impossibly thin ribbon of steel, thinner than a hair. Every time you push it through a carrot into a hard cutting board, that delicate ribbon folds over just a little to one side. Do that a few hundred times and the whole edge is leaning over like grass after a storm. The steel is all still there. It's just no longer pointing the right way. A folded edge can't cut, so the knife feels dull, even though almost nothing has actually been lost. Food scientists and knife makers have a name for this folded-over lip of steel. They call it a burr. And once you understand the burr, the Amish habits stop looking like magic and start looking like the smartest thing in the room. Because there are really 2 separate jobs hiding inside the word sharpening, and nobody ever told most of us they were different. The first job is grinding, actually removing steel to form a new pointed edge. That's what the rough mug ring does. The second job is straightening that bent ribbon back up so it points true again. That second job barely removes any metal at all. It just coaxes the edge back into line. And here's the thing that hit me hard. If most dullness is just a bent edge, then most of the time you don't need to grind away your knife at all. You just need to straighten it, which means every time we drag our knives across those aggressive electric grinders, we might be throwing away good steel to fix a problem that never needed grinding in the first place. That realization made me a little angry, honestly. But I wasn't ready to point fingers yet, because I still didn't understand the most important part of what she did. And that's the part that separates a knife that cuts from a knife that terrifies you a little when you pick it up. Watch the hand, not the tool. That's what I finally learned. When she ran that blade along the mug, her wrist never wavered. The angle of the blade against the ceramic stayed locked, stroke after stroke, like it was set in stone. And that angle is the whole ballgame. Here is the number that matters. For most kitchen knives, you want the blade tilted at somewhere between 15 and 20 degrees off the surface. That sounds technical, but you don't need a protractor, and you never did. The old way to find it is beautifully simple. Lay the flat side of your blade down on the mug ring, so it's flat as a pancake, 0 degrees. Now tip the spine up just a little. Picture stacking 2 quarters under the back of the blade and resting the spine on them. That tiny lift, the thickness of about 2 stacked coins, is close enough to the angle you want. Hold that. Don't chase it, don't rock it, just hold it and pull the edge across the grit. Too low an angle and you're just polishing the shoulder of the blade and never touching the edge. Too high and you're blunting the very tip you're trying to sharpen, rounding it off like a butter knife. The Amish woman held it perfectly without thinking, because she'd done it 10,000 times since she was a girl. For you and me, the 2-coin trick gets us there in one try. And this is exactly the moment I need to turn and talk to one person watching right now. Maybe that's you. Maybe you're sitting there thinking, this is fine for a woman in a big farmhouse with a workshop and a barn full of tools, but I live in a small apartment. No garage, no cellar, one little drawer of kitchen stuff and a sink. This part is for you specifically, and I want you to hear me, because this is the moment I realized the whole thing was built for exactly your situation. If you want every one of these techniques laid out in full detail, the angles, the strokes, the leather work, and a dozen more methods I haven't had time to cover here, they're all collected in Amish Kitchen and Deep Roots, 2 books that came out of years of documenting exactly this kind of hands-on, store-free knowledge. The complete guide, Amish Kitchen Mastery, pulls it all together in one place. You'll find the link in the description. These aren't decorative books. They're working references, the kind you keep on the counter, not the shelf. But even after all that, I still hadn't solved the last piece. Because the mug gets you sharp, genuinely sharp, sharp enough to slice paper and tomatoes and anything you cook. It does not get you to that eerie, shaving sharp edge I saw her produce, the edge that made the blade almost hiss through the food. There was a second step, and that second step is the real secret finale. The thing the whole video has been building toward. You don't need a workshop. You don't need a single thing you don't already have. Go to your cabinet and pull out any mug or bowl with an unglazed ring on the bottom, and I promise you have one. Stoneware, a cheap diner mug, an old cereal bowl, the underside of a ceramic plate. They all have that raw ring where the glaze stops. Set it upside down on a folded dish towel so it won't slide. That towel is your whole safety system. Now take your dull knife, tip the spine up about 2 coins worth, and pull the blade toward you across that rough ring, moving from the base of the blade to the tip in one smooth sweep like you're trying to shave a thin slice off the ceramic. Do it about 10 times on one side. Then flip the knife and do the other side the same way, the same angle, the same count, so both sides meet in a clean point. That's it. That's the entire first stage, done on a countertop the size of a cutting board, in an apartment on the 4th floor, with the traffic going by outside. No garden, no root cellar, no $40 gadget. A mug you already own in 1 minute of your time. I tested this on the crummiest steel I could find, a knife from a gas station kitchen set, the kind that comes free with something. Even that knife came back. It won't stay sharp as long as good steel, but it came back, and it cut, and it cost me nothing to prove it. But here's where the mystery turned dark for me, because once I understood how simple this really was, I had to ask a question I didn't like. If a coffee mug in 1 minute can do this, why did I spend years believing I needed to buy something? Why does every store have a whole shelf of pull-through sharpeners and electric grinders and fancy stone kits when a cup and a scrap of leather have worked for 200 years? That's when I stopped seeing this as a cute trick and started seeing who benefited from me not knowing it. Think about those pull-through sharpeners. The little plastic ones with the crossed carbide teeth you drag the blade through. They feel satisfying. You hear that grinding sound and you think, it's working. But here's what's really happening inside there. Those fixed carbide teeth don't straighten your edge. They tear metal off it, fast and rough, at whatever angle the slot forces on you, whether it suits your knife or not. They gouge away steel every single time. Knife makers have watched good knives lose years of their life to those cheap gadgets. You're not sharpening your knife. You're feeding it into a machine that eats it a little at a time, so that eventually the knife wears out and you buy another one. And that's the quiet arrangement nobody put in writing. A knife that you can maintain forever, with a cup and a strip of leather, is a knife you never replace. A knife you slowly grind to death with a throwaway plastic tool is a knife you buy again in a few years, plus the tool, plus the replacement tool when that one wears out. The simple way lasts a lifetime. The sold way keeps a register ringing. Nobody ever stood up and announced they wanted us to forget the mug. They just filled the shelves with something shinier and let the old knowledge quietly slip out of our hands. The Amish never let it slip, and that's not because they're stubborn about the past. It's because their whole way of living is built around not depending on a store, not depending on electricity, not depending on anything that can break down and leave you helpless. A skill that lives in your hands can't be taken away, can't wear out, can't be discontinued. When you can sharpen any blade with objects that are already in the room, you are free in a way that no gadget can ever give you. That's the thing I finally understood standing in that kitchen. It was never really about the knife. It was about not needing anyone's permission to keep your tools working. But even after all that, I still hadn't solved the last piece. Because the mug gets you sharp, genuinely sharp, sharp enough to slice paper and tomatoes and anything you cook. It does not get you to that eerie, shaving sharp edge I saw her produce. The edge that made the blade almost hiss through the food. There was a second step, and that second step is the real secret finale, the thing the whole video has been building toward. Let me tell you what I saw, and then let me tell you where I finally found it written down. After she finished with the mug, she reached over and picked up a strip of leather. Just leather. A worn, darkened band of it, maybe 1.5 feet long, smooth as a saddle on one side. She laid it flat, held one end, and drew the knife backward along it. Backward. Spine leading, edge trailing, the exact opposite of how you drag it across a stone. Away from the edge, over and over, flipping the blade between passes, light as anything. Maybe 15 seconds of that. And when she was done, that knife could shave the hair off the back of her arm. I couldn't figure out how dragging a knife over soft leather could possibly make it sharper. Leather is softer than steel. It can't grind anything. It made no sense to me at all. And that's exactly why I had to go dig. Here's what I found, and here's why it works. That strip of leather is called a strop, and stropping is the oldest finishing secret in the world of sharp edges. Remember the burr? That microscopic folded ribbon of steel at the very edge? Even after you grind a fresh edge on the mug, there are still tiny ragged teeth and a faint bent lip left along that edge, too small to see. The strop does two things at once. Its firm leather flexes just enough to catch that ribbon and stand it perfectly upright, aligning every last microscopic tooth so they all point the same way. And the leather itself, with the fine grit and oils worked into it over years, polishes that edge to a mirror, wiping away the last ragged burr. Grinding makes the edge. Stropping perfects it. That's the difference between sharp and frightening. And this is not folk superstition. This is the exact method every barber in America used for more than 100 years to keep a straight razor keen enough to shave a man's throat without drawing blood. Walk into any barber shop in the 1800s or the early 1900s and you'd see it hanging right there by the chair, a long leather strop, and you'd hear that rhythmic slap-slap before every shave. They weren't sharpening the razor each morning. They were stropping it, straightening and polishing that edge back to perfection in a few seconds, because a stone would have worn a fine razor out in no time. The barbers knew what the knife-gadget shelves later made us forget. Most of keeping an edge is not grinding, it's aligning. I found the practice laid out plainly in the old barber trade manuals from the early 1900s, the training guides that taught apprentices how to hone and strop a razor before they were ever allowed near a customer's face. The barber's manual of that era spells it out step by step. Spine first, light pressure, alternating sides, the edge trailing across the leather. The same motion, exactly, that the Amish woman used on a kitchen knife in a farmhouse 100 years later. The knowledge never died. It just moved out of the shops in the cities where people traded it for convenience, and it stayed alive in the homes that never stopped relying on their own two hands. And you don't need to buy a leather strop either, which is the part I love most. You already own leather. The back of an old leather belt works. A leather work glove pulled flat over the counter works. Even the smooth flesh side of a scrap of leather from an old bag or wallet will do the job. Lay it down, hold it taut, and draw your freshly mug-sharpened knife backward across it. Spine leading, edge trailing, 10 or 15 light passes to a side. If you want the barber's own boost, rub the tiniest bit of a mild abrasive into the leather first, even a smear of a fine metal polish, and it'll cut that mirror edge faster. But bare leather alone, worked patiently, will take you most of the way there. So here's the whole answer to the thing I saw, the mystery that made me stare like a fool in that kitchen. She flipped a mug and used the raw ceramic ring to grind a brand new edge in seconds, because ceramic is harder than kitchen steel and shaves it clean. Then she straightened and polished that edge on a strip of leather, the barber's strop, aligning the microscopic teeth and wiping away the burr until the blade could shave. Two objects most people already have. 1 minute of work. An edge that a $40 electric grinder can't honestly beat, on a knife that will now outlive the person using it, because nothing is being ground to death. That's why the title says every Amish house needs this, but almost no one does it. Every Amish home has the mug and the strip of leather and, more importantly, the hands that know the 2-coin angle and the trailing stroke. And almost every modern home threw all of that away in exchange for a plastic gadget that quietly wears the knives out and needs replacing itself. We didn't lose this knowledge because it stopped working. We lost it because someone put something shinier on the shelf, and we believed the simple thing in front of us couldn't possibly be enough. Let me put a few more real numbers on this so you feel just how lopsided the trade was. A decent electric sharpener runs you anywhere from $30 to over $100. It takes up a drawer, it needs replacing when the motor or the abrasive wears out, and every pass eats measurable steel off your blade. The mug you already paid for years ago, probably a couple of dollars when it was new. The belt or the scrap of leather cost you nothing today. And with proper stropping, a good knife needs actual grinding on the mug only once in a great while, because most days a folded edge just needs straightening, not removing. That means one good knife, maintained the old way, can genuinely serve you for decades. My grandmother's kitchen knife was older than my father. Now I understand why. Nobody in that lineage ever ran it through a machine that ate it alive. They stropped it, and it stayed. I want you to actually go try this, today, before the feeling fades, because that's the whole point of what I do here. Don't take my word for it. Take the dullest, saddest knife in your kitchen, the one you've half given up on. Flip over a mug onto a folded towel. Tip the spine up 2 coins worth. 10 pulls aside, base to tip. Then grab your old belt, lay it flat, and draw the blade backward across the leather. Spine first. 15 light strokes aside. Then hold up a sheet of newspaper and slice down through it. When it cuts clean, with that soft, tearing whisper, you're going to feel exactly what I felt. A little bit of wonder and a little bit of anger that nobody told you sooner. Because that's what this really is. It's the moment you stop paying over and over to fix a problem you were always able to fix for free. It's taking back a small piece of self-reliance that was quietly lifted out of your hands and sold back to you in a plastic package. The Amish never handed it over, and now you don't have to either. If you're the kind of person who hates throwing away good money and good steel, who's tired of gadgets that break and tips that don't work, who would rather trust something you can prove with your own 2 hands at your own counter today, then you already belong here. This is knowledge that outlasts a warranty. That's the whole idea. Now I want to hear from you. And I want you to actually do this, because I know most of you watch and slip away without a word. Tell me one thing in the comments. When you tried the 2-coin angle on the mug, did your knife pass the paper test on the first go, or did it take you a second round to find the angle? Just tell me first try or second try, and which knife you saved. I read them, and I want to know how many blades we bring back to life together. And if you want more of this, the real, tested, hands-on wisdom that the modern kitchen threw away, come with us. This isn't about following a channel. It's about a group of us slowly recovering the things our great-grandparents knew and refused to let die. Subscribe and stay, because the next one is a good one. There's an Amish way to keep a knife from ever going dull in the first place. A single change to how you cut on the board that stops that microscopic edge from folding over at all. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. I'll show you that next. Bring your dullest knife. We've got work to do. That leaning edge is exactly where I pick things up inside the Amish kitchen circle. This video gave you the overview, but in there we go deeper. Coaxing that steel back to true. And if you get stuck, ask me your own question, and a real person, me, answers you myself. You won't be doing this alone. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen, and you can cancel anytime.